by the tragic murder of Exie Wilson. Her head, chopped from her body, was discovered days later in an ornate wooden box.
Welcome to our video on the most spine-chilling and terrifying serial killer couples in history. Brace yourselves for a journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche as we explore the twisted and macabre relationships of these deadly pairs. From the notorious Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo to the lesser-known, but no less terrifying Inessa Tarverdiyeva and Roman Podkopaev, we will take you on a rollercoaster ride through the most gruesome and shocking crimes committed by these ruthless duos. The stories of these 10 serial killer couples are not for the faint of heart, but for those brave enough to confront the darkest aspects of the human condition. So, sit back, hold on tight, and let's dive into the dark and chilling world of the most terrifying serial killer couples in history. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel for similar contents. 10. Alton Coleman and Debra Brown. United States. Alton Coleman and Debra Brown were a deadly duo responsible for a killing spree that spanned 6 states and claimed the lives of at least 8 innocent victims in the early 1980s. Coleman, a charming and manipulative man with a history of violent behavior, met Brown, a meek and submissive woman, while he was serving time in prison. Upon his release, the two embarked on a crime spree that terrorized the Midwest and East Coast of the United States. Their crimes were brutal and senseless, with no regard for the age, gender, or race of their victims. They used a variety of methods to kill, including strangulation, bludgeoning, and shooting. They also engaged in sexual assault and robbery. Despite a massive manhunt and nationwide media attention, the couple managed to evade the law for several months. It wasn't until they were captured in Evanston, Illinois, that their reign of terror came to an end. Coleman was sentenced to death, while Brown received a life sentence. Even behind bars, Coleman continued to manipulate and control those around him. He filed numerous appeals and even managed to escape from prison, only to be recaptured a short time later. Brown, on the other hand, remained largely quiet and subdued. In 2002, Alton Coleman was finally put to death by lethal injection. His legacy, however, lives on as a reminder of the horrors that human beings are capable of. Debra Brown remains in prison to this day, serving out her life sentence for her role in one of the most chilling crime sprees in American history. 9. Caril Fugate and Charles Starkweather. United States. Caril Fugate and Charles Starkweather were a dangerous duo responsible for one of the most notorious killing sprees in American history. Starkweather, a troubled and violent young man, met Fugate, a teenage girl, in 1956. The two quickly formed a deadly bond that would lead to a killing spree that left 11 people dead in Nebraska and Wyoming. The crimes committed by them were both savage and irrational, displaying no consideration for the victim's age, gender, or race. They employed a range of techniques to carry out the killings, such as shooting, stabbing, and beating. Starkweather claimed that he and Fugate were on a mission to kill as many people as possible, inspired by a desire to be like the famous gangsters of the day. Their reign of terror finally came to an end in 1958 when they were caught in Wyoming after a high-speed chase. Starkweather was sentenced to death and executed in the electric chair, while Fugate was sentenced to life in prison. She maintained her innocence throughout her trial, claiming that she was a hostage of Starkweather's violent whims, but many have questioned her story. Their story has inspired countless books, movies, and songs, and continues to capture the imagination of the public. Caril Fugate and Charles Starkweather will forever be remembered as two of the most notorious killers in American history, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in even the most unsuspecting individuals. 8. Inessa Tarverdiyeva and Roman Podkopaev. Russia. Inessa Tarverdiyeva and Roman Podkopaev were a lethal duo responsible for a series of murders in Russia in 2014. Tarverdiyeva, a former beauty pageant contestant, and Podkopaev, her boyfriend, embarked on a killing spree that left at least 6 people dead in the city of Krasnodar. Their crimes were particularly brutal, with the victims being dismembered and their body parts scattered across the city. The pair was eventually caught after they were caught on CCTV camera leaving a victim's apartment. Tarverdiyeva and Podkopaev were both found guilty of the murders and were sentenced to life in prison. Their story shocked the Russian nation and the world at large and garnered significant media attention, with many questioning what could have driven two seemingly normal individuals to commit such heinous crimes. Some have speculated that Tarverdiyeva may have been the driving force behind the murders, while others suggest that the couple's relationship was a contributing factor. The acts perpetrated by Inessa Tarverdiyeva and Raymond Podkopaev, regardless of their motives, are a poignant reminder of the darker aspects of human behavior and the capacity for wickedness that resides within every individual. 7. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. United Kingdom. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were a notorious criminal couple who committed a series of brutal murders in the 1960s, collectively known as the Moors murders. The pair met in Manchester, England, in the early 1960s and began a romantic relationship that would ultimately lead to one of the most shocking crimes in British history. Their victims were children and young adults, and the murders were committed with a disturbing level of sadism and cruelty. The pair would lure their victims to a remote area called Saddleworth Moor, where they would rape and torture them before finally killing them. The bodies of their victims were then buried on the moors, making it difficult for police to find them. The couple was eventually caught after Hindley's brother-in-law tipped off the police, leading to the discovery of incriminating evidence in their home. They were both found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with Brady later confessing to a further 2 murders. Their crimes continue to captivate the British public, with numerous books, documentaries, and films being made about the case. Many have speculated about the motives behind the couple's crimes, with some suggesting that Brady was the driving force behind the murders, while others point to the influence of Hindley's abusive upbringing. 6. Ray and Faye Copeland. United States. Ray and Faye Copeland were a married couple from Missouri who became the oldest couple ever sentenced to death in the United States. They were convicted of murder in 1990 for the deaths of at least 5 men who had been hired to work on their farm. The couple's crimes were particularly heinous, with the victims being subjected to brutal torture and then killed. The bodies were then buried on the Copeland's farm, making it difficult for authorities to identify them. The couple was eventually caught after one of their victims managed to escape and report the abuse to the police. Ray Copeland, a former rodeo cowboy, was believed to be the mastermind behind the murders, while his wife Faye was believed to be complicit in the crimes. The couple was found guilty and sentenced to death, although they would ultimately die in prison before their sentences could be carried out. Their story has been the subject of numerous books and documentaries, with many fascinated by the couple's ability to commit such horrific crimes for so many years without being caught. Some have speculated that the couple's financial troubles may have played a role in their crimes, while others point to their violent and abusive pasts as a possible explanation. 5. Karla Homolka and Paul Kenneth Bernardo. Canada. Karla Homolka and Paul Kenneth Bernardo, also known as the Ken and Barbie killers, were a Canadian couple who committed a series of heinous crimes in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Their victims were mostly young women, including Homolka's own sister Tammy. Bernardo had a history of sexual violence, and he convinced Homolka to help him commit a string of sexual assaults and murders. The couple would drug their victims and then rape and torture them, often videotaping the crimes for their own gratification. The couple's crimes were finally uncovered in 1993 after Homolka's involvement was revealed, and she agreed to testify against Bernardo in exchange for a reduced sentence. Bernardo was eventually convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder and is currently serving a life sentence in prison. Homolka, meanwhile, served a reduced sentence for her role in the crimes, leading to public outrage and criticism of the Canadian justice system. After her release, she disappeared from the public eye, with some speculating that she had changed her name and moved to the Caribbean. The case remains one of the most notorious crimes in Canadian history, with many questioning how a seemingly normal couple could commit such horrific acts. Some have speculated that Bernardo's manipulation of Homolka played a role in the crimes, while others point to the couple's obsession with sexual violence and domination. 4. Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck. United States. Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck, also known as the Lonely Hearts Killers, were an infamous couple who operated in the United States during the late 1940s. They would lure unsuspecting victims through personal ads placed in newspapers and then rob and murder them. Fernandez had a history of manipulating women, while Beck was a former nurse who had suffered from mental health issues. Together, they would seduce vulnerable women and then convince them to turn over their savings, often leaving them destitute. Their crimes came to an end in 1949 when Fernandez's sister-in-law became suspicious of their activities and contacted the police. Fernandez and Beck were eventually arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. During their trial, the couple's bizarre and twisted relationship was revealed, with Beck confessing to being completely under Fernandez's control. Both were found guilty and sentenced to death, with Fernandez being executed in the electric chair in 1951 and Beck following him a few months later. Their story has been the subject of numerous books and films, with many fascinated by the couple's ability to manipulate and control their victims. There has been speculation that the crimes were influenced by mental illness or profound psychological problems. Conversely, some suggest that societal pressures during that time, coupled with the distorted dynamics of the couple's relationship, played a role in their actions. 3. Gerald and Charlene Gallego. United States. Gerald and Charlene Gallego were a married couple who terrorized the Sacramento area of California during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Their crimes included the abduction, rape, and murder of at least 10 people, including several young women. Gerald Gallego had a history of sexual violence and had been previously convicted of rape before meeting Charlene. The couple would often work together to lure their victims, with Charlene playing the role of the innocent bystander, while Gerald would kidnap and assault them. Their crimes were eventually uncovered in 1980 after a victim managed to escape and contacted the police. The Gallegos were arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder, with Charlene agreeing to testify against her husband in exchange for a reduced sentence. Gerald was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death, while Charlene received a 16-year prison sentence. Gerald was executed in 2002, while Charlene was released from prison in 1997 after serving her sentence. Their crimes were particularly gruesome and shocking, with many pointing to the couple's twisted and sadistic relationship as a contributing factor. Gerald's history of sexual violence and Charlene's complicity in his crimes have led many to question the nature of their relationship and the motivations behind their crimes. 2. Fred and Rosemary West. England. Fred and Rosemary West were a married couple who committed a series of horrific crimes in Gloucester, England, during the 1970s and 1980s. Their crimes included the abduction, rape, and murder of at least 12 young women, including several of their own children. Fred had a history of sexual violence and had been previously convicted of several crimes before meeting Rosemary. Together, they would often lure their victims with promises of work or lodgings before subjecting them to unspeakable torture and abuse. Their crimes were eventually uncovered in 1994 after police were tipped off by a young woman who had escaped from their captivity. The Wests were arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and sexual assault. During their trial, the horrific details of their crimes were revealed, with Rosemary even admitting to participating in the torture and murder of her own stepdaughter. Both were found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, with Fred ultimately committing suicide while in custody in 1995. Their case shocked the world and raised many questions about how such horrific crimes could be perpetrated by a seemingly ordinary couple. The West's twisted and sadistic relationship has been the subject of much speculation, with many pointing to their childhoods and the societal pressures of the time as contributing factors. 1. Caril M. Bundy and Doug Clark. United States. Caril M. Bundy and Doug Clark were a couple who terrorized the Los Angeles area during the early 1980s. Their crimes included the rape and murder of at least 7 young women. Clark had a history of sexual violence and had been previously convicted of several crimes before meeting Bundy. The couple would often work together to lure their victims, with Bundy playing the role of the seductress, while Clark would attack and kill them. Their crimes were eventually uncovered in 1980 after police were tipped off by a young woman who had narrowly escaped their captivity. Bundy and Clark were arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and sexual assault. During their trial, the horrific details of their crimes were revealed, with Bundy even admitting to participating in the torture and murder of one of their victims. Both were found guilty and sentenced to death, with Bundy ultimately dying of natural causes while in custody in 2003. The couple's twisted and sadistic relationship has been the subject of much speculation, with many questioning the motivations behind their crimes and the extent to which each was responsible for the atrocities they committed. Regardless of the motive, this case remains one of the most notorious examples of serial killer couples in American history. The stories of these 10 serial killer couples are a chilling reminder of the potential for evil that exists within some individuals and the devastating impact that it can have on innocent lives. We hope that this video has shed some light on the heinous crimes and twisted relationships that defined these couples and serves as a reminder to always be vigilant in the face of danger. Should you have any questions or comments, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you have found this video informative and thought-provoking.